Well, hello and welcome to the Truth Contract. Today we have something very special for you. We've been diving deep over the last 6 to 8 weeks into something that we have coined SpermEggGeddon. SpermEggGeddon, a crisis hiding in plain sight. But before I dive into that, I would just like to, for all of those of you who are watching us on the replay, if you have come through Twitter, or sorry, X, or anywhere else that I've been posting about this and would like to follow us on Substack, then this is the QR code to scan. I'll leave that up just for a second. If you would like to join us over on Substack where we publish everything, then that's the place to go. Okay, so I will take that down now. There we go. And yes, SpermEggGeddon, a crisis hiding in plain sight. So after about 6, 8 weeks of pretty relentless research, David, our co-founder, has uncovered a chilling truth, which is our ability to build families is under threat. Focusing specifically on the UK, our fertility rate has plummeted to 1.44 children per woman, and that was in 2023 from the ONS, Office of National Statistics. And that is an historic low, far below the 2.1 children per woman needed to sustain our population. So at a rate of just under 1.5 children per couple, the UK could shrink from 70 million to 40 million in just 50 to 60 years, so 2 generations. This isn't science fiction, it's a demographic disaster unfolding now. So we will dive deeper into this conversation during this hour. And we will also be talking about how we're launching this, and a podcast that both David and James Roguski, who's on this call, have recently recorded about this very topic. So David, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. You've stolen a little bit of my thunder already, but never mind.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, never mind. I'm going to share one particular slide in our presentation. Actually, this report was only about a week to 10 days old, and it shows the TFR, the total fertility rate, in just about every country in the world. And actually, if you look at the UK, which is 4th or 5th from the top left-hand side, actually in 2025, it dropped down to 1.36 children per woman from 1.41 the previous year and 1.43. And there are very few countries around the world that are increasing, and you can see those in green, but it's less than 10 countries around the world. And James has very kindly sent me lots of other information about what shrinking populations look like. And there's a shape to an age profile that shows that a country is in decline. And China's in decline, India's in decline, the US, the whole of the West, the whole of Europe. And this has been going on for a long time. And this, I think, reflects two things. One, the assumption, which I believe is correct, that a lot of this has been perceived and actually attributed to lifestyle choices where people have chosen to not marry at all, get married later, have fewer children, have children later in life, and all of those sort of lifestyle choices. But as we'll see and talk about today, there's been another subject, which is that the quantity and quality of sperm count has rapidly declined over the last 40 years by between 50 and 60%. And the quality of eggs in ovaries has also significantly rapidly declined, and in particular over the last 5 years. And so I'm going to stop sharing this for a moment, and I was just going to share something else, which is, if I can find it, just to show you that the figures that Amy was talking about are made up. This is all a whole bunch of very clever calculations by Grok, which basically says that if the decline in the TFR, which I showed you on that chart just now, continued to decline at 0.05% annually, which is what it has been declining at for the last 20 years. If there was no immigration in the UK, our population would reduce by 25% in approximately 12 to 13 years, and would reduce by 50% in 25 years, 22 to 23 years. So in the absence of immigration, with a continued decline in sperm quality and quantity and egg viability, we're staring down the barrels of a 25% decline in our population over a 12 to 13 year period, and a 50% reduction in the next 25 years. And no one is talking about this. And so several weeks ago, and I'll perhaps share the slide, I was presented with one particular slide, which I'll show you in a second, which, in fact, I'll show it to you now rather than tease you. It was this slide here. And I had a number of thoughts. One is, well, where is the source data for this? Is this true? Is this accurate? What happened after 2011? And what's caused this? And over the last couple of months, with lots and lots of conversations and exchanges with James Roguski, we decided that this was very important. Not enough people knew about it. And I'll share a couple of, genuine true stories. Soon after I discovered this, I spoke to my daughter about it. I have two children. My daughter's 38, my son's 34. And I've been blessed in the last 2 years with two grandsons, one from each of my children. And in my own history, I was married a long time ago, and we struggled to have two children, and in fact went through 9 pregnancies to end up with 2 children. And my daughter was pregnancy number 6, and my son was pregnancy number 8. So I've been through that horrible long journey of not being able to get pregnant, having miscarriages, etc., etc. So it's something close to my heart. But I mentioned this to my daughter, and she said, "Dad, I'm in a group of young mums in London, and the youngest is 34. There's 32 in the group. The youngest was 34, and the oldest was 42. He said, no one can get pregnant. It's just the talk of the town." And so I wanted to find out, A, what happened after 2011, and B, what's caused this. And so we've done lots and lots of research into what's caused this. And some of you will be relieved to know that it's not climate change. He says, tongue in cheek. I'm sure someone will try and persuade me that it has been, but anyway. Um, so I also, as James and I started talking and agreed to collaborate on this project, I ran this past a dozen friends of mine who are my age and have got kids, who haven't yet children, a few have and are struggling. And when I shared these facts, people were like, is this true? This is disastrous. This is terrible. Why is no one talking about it? And uh, David Bell, who I can see is on the call today, when I chatted to him about it, he said, "Oh, we've known about this in the medical industry for decades." Um, and I've spoken to half a dozen other medical industry people who've all said, "Oh, yes, we've known about this forever." It's like, well, how come we, the public, don't know about it? How come this existential threat to the population of the world, and in particular our own countries, is not mainstream news? And that begs a number of conversation points. Anyway, James, why don't you perhaps, and I'm happy to point to any graphs and slides, but why don't you share some of your thoughts about the research that we did?
Well, I think you and everyone who's working with you have done a spectacular job, and I'm going to actually really go to some very fundamental basics. Step number one is always awareness. And if a person, family, couple are trying to start a family, have a baby, it's all too obvious to them. But as seems to be the case, you could, look at what happened with COVID. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's just me. It's my problem. They don't necessarily realize that other people are having similar issues, similar problems, similar experiences, and all that sort of thing. Um, so I like to differentiate between a lack of awareness, which, I think all of the work that you and everyone behind you have done is going to do much to try to raise the issue and raise the awareness. The second problem is worse, and I pronounce the word differently, is ignorance. It's not stupid. Ignorant doesn't mean stupid. If you choose to know, if you know about something, if you are aware of it, but you ignore it, that's a choice. And so I think what we can do is help people. And, this is what you're doing with the truth contract as a whole. And I'd love for you to talk, a little bit more about how this fits into the bigger picture. What are the facts? What is the data? What is the evidence? What is really going on? That's kind of intimately tied with why these things happening. It's multifactorial almost always. But then when people learn and become aware, when they choose to ignore a problem, then it's on you. If you know about something and you try to get other people to become aware of it, you can't make them care about the problem. But if you keep that secret to yourself and you don't tell anybody, well, then you're to blame. If you share the information with people and other people have good ideas about how do we address this issue. And David, I think one of the things that you said we're asking for is just for people to be open and share information about their experiences. I have secondhand, living vicariously through other people who've had these problems. I do not have children, but we have friends who spent thousands and thousands of dollars, to try to conceive. And ultimately, to make a very long story short, the two parents, only one of them was biological. So in two different sets of people that I can, intimately think about, in order for them to have children, they had to get an egg donor. And so, I mean, it complicates life in so many ways. Um, you know, those situations have worked out wonderfully well for them, but the average person cannot afford, you know, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 to make those things happen.
Let me explain to everyone a little bit about what we've done. So James and I recorded a video going through this presentation last Thursday, and I'll show a little bit. And by hopefully close of play tomorrow, Wednesday, we will launch SpermEggGeddon.com, a website, and that website will contain an hour's talk between James and I going through this slide deck. It will contain a link to the PDF version of the slide deck so people can download it and view it in their own time. And thirdly, it will contain this QR code and a link to the bibliography, which is all of the research that underpinned each point. And let me just explain that to you very quickly. So there's a 12-hour clock, and we've broken it down into 12 buckets, if you like, of toxicity that contribute towards a reduction in sperm quality and quantity, and a diminution in egg quality. And each of these points, and this one is pointing to toxic EMF pollution and 5G exposure, we've listed as a bunch of bullet points some of the areas that we were able to research that have a scientific peer-reviewed study which shows that these bullet points all have not just a what's the word? What's the opposite of causation? Correlation. They have both a correlation and a causation in scientifically researched papers, and so we've listed all of the papers that we studied which showed, you know, and most of them have it in the title, the effect of mobile telephones on sperm quality, you know. So we've only listed research that's peer-reviewed, scientific evidence-based, that links to a reduction in sperm quality or quantity or both. And so, as you'll see, we've done that for every one of the topics. We've listed the bullet points, and then we've listed the research. So in the SpermEggGeddon.com website, there'll be 4 windows, if you like. One will be watch the video. The second will be a PDF version of this slide deck. And the third will be only the bibliography all in one place. So people can then read the reports and understand the impact on them. And many of them also have solutions and remedies and ideas, like switching your Wi-Fi off at night, carrying your mobile phone in a Faraday bag, etc., etc. So that, you know, hopefully we've also got solutions, not just problems. Let me just, is there any, yes.
There's a couple of questions there. One from Ian. Do we know the year when this decline began?
The major book, which is this one here, which produced this study here, started from 1973 and went through to 2011, which is that chart there. But this is the major piece of research from this book, which was a global study. And so the starting point in this study was 1973. And so the decline of 50% occurred between 1973 and 2011 in the study, but then the study was updated in 2017, 2018, another study, and then other studies finished in 2000, and one in 2022 as well. So a number of different studies. And we did put all of those studies into Grok, and David Twaddell, who's on the call and is one of our investors in Wisdom Council, he very kindly helped me produce this graph from all the different data points that Grok produced. So does that answer your question, Ian?
You're on mute, Ian. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just thinking if we knew the year, then you can see what really changed that might have started this cascade of decline.
Who knows what happened before 1973? I haven't accessed any older information, but there are a number of studies that all start around 1973, global studies. I think there were 11 studies in total that added up to the information that David kindly turned into the Grok chart. But whether it started in 1945 or 1845, it's dropped by 50% of what it was in 1973.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot going on since the 70s and 80s anyway.
Indeed. We have another thought here really from Roger, which is I think individuals think it won't affect them, won't happen to them until it does. And then there's a stigma and a feeling of failure. They feel so maybe, they don't then discuss it. And obviously men are less likely to tell their mates that they're firing blanks than women are with discussing it with their friends, which I think is quite a common issue. And just some of the couples in the late 30s and early 40s that we know, this is already causing issues within marriages and breakups and all sorts because one's blaming the other or they can't seem to come together to talk about it sufficiently.
Yeah.
So there's also not much in the way of understanding or skill in communication and navigating this issue because it is quite a hot potato. Just fertility generally is quite a hot topic in that sense. Not the lack of it, but I just mean if somebody's firing blanks or isn't producing fertile eggs.
Yeah, my son at school, they're still teaching them that there's global overpopulation, and they think it's got to be reduced, and it's already rapidly declining. And so the educational system's partly to blame, I think.
Yeah, indeed.
I think also the cost of IVF and trying to do something about it is exorbitantly expensive because they know how much couples want babies and they cash in on that desire as well. I'm sure it doesn't cost half of what they charge to actually sort it out.
Let me stop sharing. I can open it back up again if anyone's got any questions. But I mean, so very quickly, the presentation, which you'll all be able to download, view, watch, listen to over the next few days, has looked at all of the studies, shown some of this is all about sperm count and egg quality. This is a new demographic book, which shows how the world population pretty much everywhere is decreasing rapidly. And so the point that Roger just made, or sorry, Ian just made, or whoever's teaching in schools, is just wrong. And anyway, we then go through all the 12 points and have all the reference data. And then we talk about the products that are causing all of this with evidence, who owns those products, and of course, who owns the companies that own those products. Surprise, surprise, it's the usual few suspects. And of course, all this does tie into the matrix, which is a big part of what the truth contract is all about revealing. And
David, do you want to speak to the truth contract some more? The matrix, sorry, some more, just for those who are coming to us through SpermEggGeddon.
I will. And before I do, I just had one other thought. It is clear in the UK that it's clear to me, I'm not saying I have evidence for this, but this has been known about for a long period of time. And since the global financial crash in 2008, GDP per person in this country has been static. Yet in that same period of time, we've had over 6 million net immigration. And over the last 30 years, we've had 10 million people. And so the population has been growing, but it's been growing at an exponential rate based on immigration. And I was shocked this week to understand that of those 10 million people who've migrated into the UK over the last 30 years, the average immigrant is a taker from the system, not a contributor to the system, which is why that GDP per capita has been so flat. And actually, there is a cost to the UK taxpayer of the average migrant. Now, obviously, many of them are doctors and scientists and engineers and fantastic people who bring skills that we benefit from. But the total cohort together has ended up costing the UK taxpayer, not contributing to it. And so if we had a no more immigration policy, given that we don't want more immigration if it's the same expensive immigration we've had, if we had no more immigration and the population declines by 25% within 13 years and 50% within 25 years, none of that modeling is being done by the ONS. No one's looking at the young people to old people, retired people ratio, and the young people are supposed to be paying the taxes to pay the older people's pensions and pay for their care and be their care. And so, if all of this is true, which I think it is, why would anyone start up a consumer business, with a 20-year plan? James sent me some fantastic links to US companies where you can do a sperm count check by post. And so I think there's probably lots of opportunities to have a similar. I haven't managed to find one in the UK, but I'm sure there are. But if we think about the macroeconomic impact on the UK or the US of these statistics, it's mind-bogglingly complex and doesn't head in a good direction. So you asked me to talk about the matrix. So to me, SpermEggGeddon is a project, a special project that we've done. And unlike all the other projects we've ever done where we said, here's the problem and here's the solution, we didn't have time to unpack all of this presentation in our conversation the other day, but I'm sure we need to move on to solutions. And some of those solutions are things like change your household cleaning products from ones that contain these endocrine disrupting chemicals, or personal care products from your soap or your shampoo. You would be shocked to find out how much of these day-to-day famous brand household products contain EDCs. So there are things we can do. Switch the Wi-Fi off at night. Don't have the mobile phone in your back pocket or your bra. Have a Faraday bag and all those other good things. But some of these things need a systemic solution. It's not an individual solution. For example, I hadn't realized how fluoride in the drinking water, now tap water, is very damaging to the quality and viability of eggs in ovaries. And so one of the things that we need to be lobbying for is for fluoride to not be put in the water in the first place because of its severe detrimental effects. But we also need to look at all the other things that are put in the water, or end up in the water, like antidepressants and antibiotics, and the killer one is the women's pill. And so we need to filter out the estrogen or estrogenic substances that the pill puts into the water so that we're not poisoning, the next generation. I mean, the real wake-up call for me was, my two children have given me two lovely grandchildren, and I was thinking, oh my God, my two grandchildren, who are nearly 2 and nearly 1, two little boys, they could be sterile in 25 years' time because they live in this toxic soup. And, however healthy their mum feeds them and exercises them and schools them and parents them, so much of this toxic soup, A, probably my daughter doesn't know about, B, it's not a national crisis. And so lots of things can be changed, but some of it needs systemic change. And James, would you, if you're able or willing, later on this evening, Amy and I are going to watch a movie that's just come out today, and I can put it in the chat later, all about mRNA. It's a film that's just been launched today. And the damage that the mRNA technology and platform does to eggs in women's ovaries is beyond shocking. There's many tests that have proven that it's made 60% of a women's eggs unviable. And so, I mean, the whole mRNA technology needs to be banned and stopped, but in particular because of the harm it's having on fertility. So, James, would you jump in and rescue me?
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to that as much as you are. Just so you know, David, I mentioned to Amy before you got onto the call that I do have to leave shortly because I have to go to, unfortunately, a funeral service for a family member. And this is an aspect of what we're dealing with. It was known well before the rollout of the mRNA jabs that the biodistribution within the body had a propensity for the ovaries in particular. Paul Merrick just came out with a video talking about how analysis of sperm have shown high numbers of spike protein. It is certainly something that the mainstream media will likely just poo-poo and say, oh, conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers, or whatever. My concern is there's this confusion going on where, the Health and Human Services have taken away funding for mRNA, but quietly in that same statement, they said that they are continuing to fund Arcturus and Amplitude, which are focusing on self-amplifying RNA and trans-amplifying RNA. Now, before people jump to what you hear in your mind when you hear trans-amplifying, it's not what you're thinking, it's different. But still, it's technology that is worse than the horrors that we've been dealing with, for the last 5.5 years. And, in the grand scheme of the world, $500 million being redirected is the proverbial drop in the bucket. There are hundreds of clinical trials. There are, billions of dollars being invested into manufacturing capacity and so forth around the world. I just published an article today about how, the WHO is negotiating, looking for more pathogens that are not causing pandemics, but they want to bring them into a biohub lab to make more products to treat problems even before they are problems. They're talking about a universal vaccine. The industry that profits from dis-ease is, running on all cylinders. They're going full speed ahead. It isn't going to get better if we just allow them to continue to do what they're doing. And so, this is a difficult problem. And I think it was you, David, who said earlier, just, in this call, oh, people don't think it's going to happen to them. But when it happens to them, it's too late, and so preparedness or prevention, what is the saying? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. People are unwilling to go for that ounce of prevention because they don't think it's a problem. And so at the very least, we're going to do a service of raising people's awareness, hopefully trigger some people's creative juices and get them to work on solutions to the problem. But, on a much bigger spiritual level, what is going on in the world that has led us to this point? And, the bigger questions of what is life? And, it's not just numbers, it's quality of life. To have a child who is not born the way nature intended fertilization and gestation and birth to happen, changes each person on a deep psychological level in ways that people don't want to pay attention to. And so you mentioned, birth control pills washing out into the water stream. Well, I've thought about this for decades. I became aware of this probably in the 90s. Since probably my whole life, since the 60s, every woman who's taken birth control pills or any kind of hormone supplement, every egg in her body has been swimming in those hormones for as long as she's been taking those products. To say that it doesn't impact the next generation, and then if she's exposed to those things while she's pregnant, the eggs in the growing fetus are the generation after her child, so the grandchild. We've spent our lives, going through this without really consciously looking at it, going, what in the hell are we doing? Okay. The phthalates. I mean, 30 years ago, I read a story of a 2-year-old in the Philippines who had been exposed to phthalates and was starting to menstruate at 2. And you just go, what in the world are we doing? We have a responsibility to raise awareness and do what we can to stop it. Just because you put some plastic softening compounds in your bottle so you can squeeze it, and have it be flexible, to destroy the next generation of, humanity. We need to think hard and take action about this. So I'll stop there, but I am going to have to leave soon, but thanks again to everybody for all that you're doing.
Thank you so much, James.
Thank you, James. Roger, you and I were chatting when we saw each other on Sunday about this, and I think you had some very pertinent, up-to-date information, I think, as well about the mRNA what's the word?
Transamplifying.
Yes. Can you share a bit more with everyone about that?
Yeah, it's just the next, as James was saying, it's the next step where they actually separate out the two parts of the self-amplifying. So you've RNA, so they say then they can put in less of the antigenic protein developing part of the RNA, and they put in more of the RNA that self-amplifies. but of course they say they can reduce the amount of the antigenic RNA by something like 40 times, but you bet your bottom dollar that the self-amplifying bit that they've added separately will replicate more than 40 times. So although it sounds like they're actually going to be reducing, for argument's sake, if they're doing it with the COVID jabs, it would be reducing the amount of spike protein. You think, oh, it's going to reduce the amount of spike protein by 40 times. It actually isn't. It's actually probably going to increase it beyond what the old jabs were doing. It's just doing it in a very different way. And the more you actually introduce that self-amplifying RNA element, as far as I'm concerned, you're increasing the risks associated with exogenous nucleic acids in the body, which can have all sorts of interference with cell signaling or and other aspects of biology that we're sort of messing with. So it's it's very dangerous. As you were saying, I think it's more serious with girls because they're born with the whole complement of their eggs for the whole of their life. If men something happens to us, we get irradiated on the gonads and it stops sperm production for a little while, then we can recover. But if a woman's ovaries are irradiated or have some chemical or whatever happens to them to reduce the eggs in there, it will actually have effects not just on the next generation but on the generation down as well. So this is it's really significant what we're talking about, and it's more serious for women than for men for that reason, because this can have two generations at least knock-on effect.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from other people on the call?
Just while people may want to type in some questions.
Maybe put your hand
David,
up or something.
put your hand up, unmute yourself. Yeah. David shared an X post in the chat, which I will link in the follow-up that I do to this, but it's by Nicholas Hulscher, Hulscher, and this is the world premiere called Inside mRNA Vaccines, the movie, which is apparently out today. So I look forward to seeing that later. Yeah, are there any questions? Yep, we've got one from Shemya. Would you like to unmute yourself? Hello.
David and Amy, I just met you through James, through email a couple days ago. I'll be in touch.
Fantastic.
It's interesting to see how far back this goes as far as the toxicity and the infertility, because for me, it didn't really get my attention until COVID and all of the miscarriages and the infertility. And the other thing that really is standing out to me is something about human nature where we've had warnings for a long time on a full range of environmental issues. And so humanity as a whole does not respond effectively to the early stages when, like, if you're familiar with the precautionary principle. So if I look at kind of the core or systemic consciousness around humanity and how we deal with things like this, it just causes me to go deeper and want to ask even a broader base question than just well, how do we stop mRNA technology so we stop infertility? It's like, how do we, well, on one level, we have corporations who go for the profit and they don't care. They're thinking short term. And then you have the bigger population reduction issue. And then you have, like someone in the feed said, people don't pay attention until it happens to them. In order for humanity or grassroots level to effectively respond, don't we have to have a broader morality around, it's not just about us. We are interconnected, and what happens to something else or someone else impacts me too. So I need to be involved before it happens to me. And so what, go ahead.
Let me have a go at sharing with you a few conversations I've had the last week or so. So one of the issues that the truth contract has perhaps encountered, that, you know, I think we're overcoming, is that point, well, unless it happens to me, I'm not really interested in it, you know. I call it the seatbelt scenario, which is if seatbelts weren't mandatory, 50% of people probably wouldn't wear one because they thought, well, I won't be involved in a traffic accident. And until they are involved in a traffic accident and become proponents of seatbelts. But I actually, so whether it's fluoride in the water or geoengineering or mRNA rollout or all the other terrible things that we're looking into and investigating and revealing the truth about in the truth contract. The thing I'm terrified about SpermEggGeddon, but the thing I'm excited about is all the people that I've spoken to in the last few weeks are all aware of the truth contract. They've all subscribed to our Substack. But this, your children might not be able to have children, or you might not be able to have any grandchildren. They're like, wait, hang on a minute. How do you figure that out? And all of a sudden, it brings it right home in their laps. What do you mean my children might not be able to have children and I might not be able to have grandchildren? Where do you get that information? Well, look at this steep decline in sperm count. Look at all the causes of it. Well, we need to do something about this. All of a sudden, to me, it's like it's the issue that's waking everybody up to all of those other topics. You know, at the end of the day, I met someone a few weeks ago who said, I'm not sure they're chemtrails, they're just steam out the back of the aeroplane. It's like, I promise you they're not. Anyway, when I talked to him a few days ago and I said, oh, by the way, we've got some research that the chemtrails are causing infertility, he then told me this whole long story about his 26-year-old daughter and the miscarriages she's had, and they're desperate to try and start a family. They're blaming each other, and he thinks they're going to get divorced. I was like, hang on, it's to do with chemtrails, you know, or possibly, and all these other things. He's now looking at all of the things in the clock that we just showed you, because he doesn't want his daughter to not be able to have children, or him not have grandchildren. So I'm hoping that this might be the hook, because it's an existential crisis, or as James calls it, an existential crisis. That is about, well, do we want the population of the planet to reduce? Do we want to have less children and grandchildren? And by the way, who's going to have them, if anyone has them at all? How do we select, or is there no select? So I think it sort of really hits home. You know, that's my thoughts on that question. I think it becomes a spiritual conversation much more when it's to do with this existential issue than a scientific issue which people can see the pros and cons of. That's my 2 penny worth.
Thank you. Roger, let's come to you who got your hand up, and then I'll go into the question afterwards. You're on mute, Roger.
On mute. It struck me, David, as you were saying that in the same way that the Club of Rome chose climate change as the vehicle to unite the people behind which to accept limitations to freedoms and loss of rights that they otherwise wouldn't do, maybe SpermEggGeddon is the counter to that. It's the vehicle behind which we can reunite people to actually recognize that there's a much bigger problem, and because so many of your clock face of different factors of it are actually so centrally intertwined and connected with the same culprits and faces at the center of it all, like BlackRock investing in probably every single aspect of that, we need something that's going to unite people in that same way that climate has scared them. We need something to get people to go, hang on a minute, these people are just doing it for money, and this is, as you say, an existential crisis that we need to unite together to fight.
It's a spiritual fight, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed. Thank you, Roger. We have a question from Elja. She says, my daughter is 22 years old, and I want to know how to prevent and inform our children. I think what you'll find, Elja, is once we launch SpermEggGeddon on Thursday, possibly Wednesday, but most likely Thursday, you'll be able to download the research that we've been speaking to and watch the interview that James and David did together and have that as a starting place. But overall, no more jabs. Reduce the chemicals in your house, turn off the Wi-Fi. There's all sorts of things, little things that you can start to do and educate your children on right away. So yeah, we can start there and grow this as a movement, which we hope to do. So thank you.
Amy, do you want to talk about this document, which people will be able to access?
Well, yes. So just as I was mentioning, we'll be launching SpermEggGeddon.com on Thursday. And so this that David's flicking through at the moment is a complement to the overall slides that David was sharing earlier on. So this is all the research that we've done. And each one of those bullet points where it says link at the end in pink takes you directly to that report. So some of this is scientific research, some of it is suggestions of what to do and how to do it. So there's plenty for you to get stuck into, and also talk to us. Come visit us on Substack and ask us some questions as well.
And yes, Elja, thank you so much for the question. I think you'll find the document I just showed you is full of information. But as James and I mentioned at the end of the talk, we love to hear from you. We'd like to hear from you what you've tried and has worked and what you've tried and hasn't worked. And so all of those stories. And, we also want to hear from people. It's like, okay, here's how we need to get this stopped. And here's, which are some of the more systemic issues. I don't think anyone really cares too much about fluoride in the water other than a small group of people until you say, oh, by the way, here's the impact it has on eggs and sperm. And people go, oh, hang on a minute, that's completely unacceptable. So anyway, what causes people not to care?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear what some of the other people on the call have to think about that.
The question is, what causes people not to care? Does anybody have a contribution to that one? It's definitely a psychological glitch.
I've got some thoughts on that, Amy. I think humanity and the average human being is a lot smarter than people give them credit for, and they're much more intuitive than people give them credit for. However, since 2008, the price of the average house in this country has gone up from 100,000 to 350,000. It's gone up by 250%. The average wage has gone up by 81%, and the average nurse wage has gone up by 27% in real terms. And so, millions and millions of people are living month end to month end, paycheck to paycheck, trying to get the kids to school, get to work. And it's not that they don't care, they're in survival mode. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're working on at the Truth Contract at the moment for discussion but we're trying to figure out how we can get all of our content sponsored so the average person doesn't have to pay for it. And so more and more people can't say, oh, well, I can't afford the $7.50 a month or the £75 a year because I'm skint or I'm out of work or I'm on benefits, but I'm still interested in all of this. So we want to get, so I've got more faith in the average person, particularly someone who's either got kids or want kids, or which is, I think, most people. Through that lens, they do care. That's my thoughts. Right, we've got 4 minutes to go. Anyone else want to put their hand?
Any other questions? Any other thoughts? No. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Alja says, my daughter's living in BC and I'm from Quebec. When I was living in BC, British Columbia, I was part of the meetings, rallies, and people were really aggressive. Fear and TV controlled us. I have to move back to Quebec. I have faith.
Keep the faith.
Keep the faith, exactly. And don't listen to mainstream media. Thank you for your contributions, Alja, and everyone else who's here and who's asked questions and who's spoken. Shema, yes. Am I saying your name correctly? Sorry.
Oh, thanks. Shema.
Shema.
Shema. Yes, thanks. Well, there's also, you know, the whole dumbing down that's intentionally being done. I can remember decades ago when I first noticed a chemtrail, and I know the street I was standing on. I know I was looking up at the sky and noticing this was not right. But the most significant thing was an awareness that I don't feel as sharp as I used to feel.
Mm.
I you know, and as we get normalized, we forget the higher frequency we were once functioning at. And so, yes, everybody wants the dream life and the family and the white picket fence. And as long as they're have all their needs and, you know, their life is functioning fine, they don't have bigger needs. The generic population, you know, there are a small percentage that are visionaries and are concerned about the bigger whole. But if you just look at the generic population, there's just the dumbing down and the toxifying, and then they've been addicted to television, which was a strategic intent. And then they are inundated with believing that pharmaceuticals are their friends and junk food and processed foods are going to help them live a life that's already too busy, so they'll have more time for quality of life if they just get a microwave. And so, I mean, and it's a slow drip, you know, the frog slowly boiling.
It is. And then one day, using the boiling frog story, it gets too hot and they blow up. And so, you know, we know that's the reality, but that doesn't mean that we can't wake people up and help them change course and change direction. And that's what the Truth Contract is all about, trying to help people wake up and achieve their full potential.
Absolutely. And on that note, we are at the top of the hour. So thank you all for participating and for asking your questions. It's been a great pleasure to kick SpermEggGeddon off. Stay tuned. we'll be launching the website on Thursday, where you'll be able to see the presentations that we've shared today and the interview that James and David have done together. And you can find us primarily on Substack. If you just put The Truth Contract and Substack into Google, you will find us immediately. So thank you very much. We'll look forward to next time.
And thank you for all your amazing work. Yay.
Thank you so much. Bye.